Hello and welcome to the She Reads Romance Books podcast, the ultimate show for romance book lovers looking for the best books worth reading. I'm your host, Leslie Murphy, and in each short episode, I share my favorite book list of recommendations so you know exactly what to add to your must-read list. Join me as I explore the romance genre and have fun collecting book boyfriends along the way, because life is better with a love story. All right. Welcome back, readers, to the She Reads Romance Books podcast. This is going to be a super exciting episode because I am joined by a very special guest, not only one of today's most popular romance book authors, but an author who is like slaying it on the New York Times bestseller list and who is coming out with a brand new release on June 11th, which I have no doubt is going to be on that New York Times bestselling list as well. So welcome, Katherine Center.
Hi. Hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. As I said, such an honor to have you here. I was one of the lucky readers to get an advanced copy of the Rom-Commers that comes out on June 11th. And we went on spring break recently, had to take it with me. And I honestly read it in one sitting because like, this book is so good. And it's now, I can honestly say, and I'm not just saying it because you're here, my favorite book of yours. Love it, love it, love it. So I know everyone's going to be buying it after listening to today's episode. But for people new to the book, can you give us just sort of a brief summary and tell us what the Rom-Commers is all about?
Yeah, it is a rom-com about writing a rom-com. So it's a story about screenwriters who are writing a romantic comedy screenplay together, and they fall madly in love with each other, which is not a spoiler. That's just, something forward to. And basically the idea is that he has written a romantic comedy screenplay and it's terrible. And she has gotten hired to fix it as a ghostwriter. And so she goes out to Los Angeles to help him, and he doesn't want her help. And all sorts of fireworks, verbal and otherwise, ensue. And it's a really, really fun story.
I do. And it is. Absolutely. So I mean, I love the title, but I love that it's you writing a rom-com about two writers writing a rom-com. So how did this idea even come about?
Totally sure where the idea came from. I know that the minute, like my brain is always sort of scrolling through like, oh, that could be a story. That could be a story. I mean, I see things constantly. And the minute this one sort of popped into my head, I was like, that's the one. And also the title, I was like, it could be a rom-com about screenwriters writing a rom-com, and it could be called the Rom-Commers. Like it all came at the same time. And, that's not always true for me. Titles, sometimes, we're scrambling at the last minute, the book I'm writing right now, I keep changing the title in my head, so it's not always right at the start. But this one, I just knew there are things that happen about the title in the story, and I didn't know those things were going to happen, but I knew that I wanted to call it the Rom-Commers. And so, one person I will certainly credit with being part of this, not so much the idea, but like kind of giving me mental permission to write this story, is Emily Henry. Because first of all, I madly love Emily Henry, like to the moon and back. But also the first book of hers I ever read, like a lot of people in America, was Beach Read. And I have such a vivid memory of reading that book because I read it in the bathtub. I spent the whole day in the bathtub, just like adjusting the temperature with my feet, just staying. I was like not getting out. And then I wound up actually dropping the book by accident into the bathtub when I was very close to being done. And so then I had to get out. And I remember like trying to blow it dry with like a hair dryer. I was like, I need to finish reading. And then I put it on Instagram, actually, a picture of it. And I was like, I'm a monster. Like, what just happened? Like, how could this happen? But that was one of the first books I've read lately, anyway, about writers. And I kind of didn't know that writers could write about writers. Like I thought we were maybe supposed to pick other professions to write about. And so I read that book, and it was about two writers. It was about sort of a literary guy writer and a romance woman writer. You guys have all probably read this book. I mean, everyone in the world has read it, and rightly so. But it was such a treat for me reading. I mean, so many things about that book were a treat for me. But one of the things I really was surprised by and loved was the way that these two writers in different genres kind of went after each other. And I loved seeing her school him about all the sort of beautiful benefits of romance. It was so satisfying to read that. Like it was something my heart needed that I didn't know that it needed. And so that opened this door for me. And that was years ago where I thought, oh, that's an option. Like I didn't know that writers could write about writers. So once I knew that I was allowed to do that, it was kind of irresistible because obviously I am a writer and I have been a writer for a long, long time. And I have many, many thoughts about stories and types of stories and, pen colors and all sorts of things. So for me, it was very fun to get to kind of dive in and say all those things that I think all the time, but never really say out loud.
Absolutely. So it wasn't that you happened to be like rewatching probably for the 10th time. It happened one night and the idea sort of like popped in your head. Because I know you referenced that book in it or that movie.
No, but It Happened One Night is one of my all-time favorites. And, I knew that they were going to be rewriting a rom-com and then the question was which one? There's so many options. I thought for a little while he could be trying to rewrite When Harry Met Sally. And then just the idea of that, it gave me so much anxiety. I was like, I can't put this out into the world. What if somebody actually decided to do it? What a nightmare.
Right.
So I just couldn't. I couldn't. So I picked something older, but nonetheless, a very charming watch that really still holds up.
Yeah. I have not read it or watched it yet, but it's now on my list because of this.
It's worth what? I mean, it's an old-timey black and white Clark Gable movie, and I downloaded the screenplay and read the screenplay also before I read the book, which you can do. I don't know if people know that, but like if there's a movie that you love in the world, there's a very good chance that screenplay is up on the internet somewhere. And you can just Google When Harry Met Sally's screenplay, and you can print it off on your printer and read it, for educational purposes, but also for fun.
Yeah.
It's very fun to see them on the page when you love them, getting them from another dimension. It's fun to see.
So having this idea about writing about writers, sounds super, super fun. But then was it hard, because you're a writer writing about writers, or did it flow pretty easily?
No, it was so easy. I mean, this whole story just wrote itself. I mean, it was just like magic. There was some kind of magic that happened with this story. And I love this book so, so much. If you ever read a Katherine Center book, let it be this one. Yeah. I don't know how I'm ever going to top it. Honestly, I don't know. I knew who Emma, the main character and our narrator, was going to be from pretty early on. I knew that she was going to be a person who really, really loved rom-coms and had spent her whole life loving them and studying them and just with the purest of hearts, paying attention to them, and that she was going to have had some life circumstances that kind of kept her from reaching her potential, which I think is a thing that happens to a lot of women in various ways. And I knew that Charlie was going to be this sort of big deal guy screenwriter who'd written a million mafia movies and shark movies and guy movies and
alien movies.
Yeah, I mean, that was all I needed was sort of those two elements. And immediately there were sparks and fireworks and there was tension. And it was a dream to write. It wrote itself.
Well, let's talk about Emma because I love her. She was funny. She was strong, selfless, sacrificing, right? So what do you think our readers going to love most about her?
Well, what I love the most about her, it's two things. I love that she takes such good care of her family. I love how much she loves her dad, and I love how much she loves her sister. I love that she's a good, morally upstanding person who wants to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And I relate to that so much, and I love it about her. I'm always so full of admiration for the caretakers of the world, wherever you find them, whoever they're looking after. It's such an altruistic, honorable thing to do. So I love that about Emma, that she has really made a commitment to taking care of the people she loves.
For 10 years. Yeah.
For 10 years. Yes. At great personal sacrifice, although it hasn't been all misery because the people she loves are very fun. Right. So they've had a good time together, but she just has not been able to do all the things she thought she was going to be able to do in the beginning of her adulthood. So I love that about her. And then I also love that she just does not take any guff, she stands up for herself and she stands up for rom-coms. And when Charlie Yates, snooty writer that he is, tries to roll his eyes at romantic comedies, she just lets him know all the many, many reasons why he is wrong. And I love that about her. She doesn't pull any punches. She's just this is how it is. And your screenplay is terrible. Let's count the ways. And that scene for me is really satisfying to watch, because I think if you are a person who loves rom-coms and you've thought about them and you know why you love them, being alive in the world and watching the literary world, the movie world, just the general world roll their eyes at this genre that you yourself know is magic, when it's working, it's magic. So watching the thing that you love get eye rolled at all the time it's irritating. It's irritating. You just want to be like, everybody sit down. Let me explain this to you.
Yeah.
This is why these
Yeah.
stories are awesome. And so for Emmett to get to do that to Charlie, for me, is like deeply satisfying to watch her take him to school.
And that was my hands down the best scene of the book for exactly that reason. Because she was like, I'm not holding anything back. And she just gave it to him. And it was like, not only like ripping the screenplay to shreds, but totally schooling him in like, this is what a rom-com is, dumbass. And I kind of felt that as a reader. I was like, yes, you are just like my hero championing this genre, whether it's in movies or in books. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I mean, it feels good. I think one word that you see if you're a rom-com person and you read a lot of like reviews about other rom-coms, you see the word predictable a lot. People like roll their eyes like, oh, this story was so predictable. Like I called it from the first chapter that these two characters were going to get together. And if you love the genre and you pay attention to the genre and take it seriously, what you know is, you're supposed to call it in the first chapter. Like that is a gift that the story is giving you. It's like rom-coms are not predicated on surprise. Sure, if you're reading a mystery and you call it in the first chapter, that writer didn't do a very good job, right? Because mysteries are predicated on surprise. You're not supposed to know who did it until the writer wants you to know. And that's near the end of the story. But with a rom-com, you're supposed to know that happy ending, those two people getting together. It's like this promise of the genre. It's like, it is the thing that allows the writer to create this very particular emotional experience that you only get from rom-coms. And it is this rising feeling of anticipatory bliss, right? As you watch these two people bumble around and make their mistakes, but work their way gently towards each other, as you are waiting for them to overcome all of their internal and external obstacles and figure it out and declare their undying love and smooch, like as you're waiting for that to happen, the story gives you this rising, beautiful, totally addictive, fun feeling of anticipation. And you can't get that in a serial killer story. No. You can't get that in other genres. It's only there in a rom-com, but that's because they're built in a very specific way. They are building toward that happy ending. And this is something that Emma gets to say to Charlie in the story. She's like, a love story is like sex. If you are surprised when you get to the ending, somebody wasn't doing their job. Like, it's not about where you're going. It's about how you get there, right? It's about the getting there.
Right.
And this is a thing the world really does not understand about rom-coms. And so rom-coms are constantly getting dinged, because they were predictable. I mean, it's never a nice thing when you call a story predictable. Right. And there are ways that a rom-com, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep going. You got me going. I think about it a lot. There are ways that a rom-com can be predictable that are bad. And that's in the details. Right. So that where you're going is always going to be the same in a rom-com. It's always, you're going towards a happily ever after, an HEA. But how you get there should not be predictable. That should be endlessly surprising, endlessly inventive, right? Right. And delighting readers because like, oh, we're trapped on a bus or like whatever it is, right? Right. So the details should be surprising, but the overarching shape of the story is going to be the same every time. Exactly. And so what's problematic about calling a rom-com predictable is if you don't specify which one, it could mean that it's a bad story, right? If the details of a rom-com are predictable, then it's probably not a very good rom-com. Right. So I always want to just be like, wait, which one is it? Like, is it the getting there or is it where you're going? Because one is bad and the other is good. Exactly. And I just wish I could sit all of the rom-com loving world down for a seminar and we could just talk about it and like agree to use different language. I mean, I would love to talk about, I really think the standard by which you judge a rom-com is anticipation. Did this story create a feeling of anticipation for you as a reader? If it did, it's probably a pretty good story. And if it didn't, it wasn't working. That's the question. It's not a mystery. Right.
And alongside, I would say too, the connection that you're building between those characters that build along with that anticipation. Absolutely. Oh my God.
Absolutely. Yeah. But you need that connection to build the anticipation. So if the connection's not there, you won't feel the anticipation.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, but ultimately for me, what it boils down to is, am I reading along like, oh my gosh, they're going to get together? Like if I've got that feeling, then it's working.
Yeah.
So I think we're judging them on the wrong standards. And, I see people all the time who are like, I never give a rom-com 5 stars. And I'm like, well, I think what you should be judging it on is, did it do the thing that it set out to do? And the thing it set out to do is give you a blissful, swoony, because a sort of simulated experience of falling in love. And if it did that, then yeah, that's a 5-star read to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this one definitely was. Because I loved Emma and Charlie's sort of like meet cute. I mean, she's been like crushing on his skills, like forever. But the meet cute was just like, oh man. But I loved Charlie because he just kind of had a lot of layers to him too, right? So what do you think people are going to love most about him?
Well, I mean, there's that term that goes around, grumpy sunshine. And so I never start with the terms. I always start just with the people and then later watch as they get categorized as things. But he definitely does, in the end, fall into kind of a grumpy category. And he doesn't believe in love. He's had a rough couple of years. He's got writer's block right now. So but they don't call it that. They call it the yips, which is like a golf term or like a sports term for when you're not playing very well.
Baseball. Yeah.
Yeah. But so he's this person who's had, like, Emma has had like no success, and he's had like a ton of success, but now he's in this kind of dry spell where nothing's working. And I love to watch Charlie sort of come back to life. He had a rough few years, some bad things happened to him, and he hasn't fully bounced back from them. So when you first meet him, it seems like he's just pompous, or like he's like life has been too easy for him or something, is what you sort of first think when you meet him. But as we go along, you realize that, oh no, it's much deeper than that. He's struggling with some much bigger sort of things. And so, yeah, I love the way that she, just kind of doesn't let him retreat into all that grumpiness. And she sort of forces him to sort of wake back up. And
he's very like jaded on love. Do you like writing characters who are, especially in rom-coms, if they're jaded at first?
I love watching that transformation, and I think that we as a culture are pretty jaded on love. Like, I remember seeing a review. No, it was an article with Richard Curtis. He's the screenwriter from the UK who wrote Four Weddings and a Funeral. He wrote all the Hugh Grant movies that people loved in the 90s. And he was also a writer on the Bridget Jones's Diary movie. Anyway, he's like one of my big writing sort of rom-com heroes. And we went to London a few years ago, and I was like, I need to make a pilgrimage to Notting Hill and pay my respects to Richard Curtis. But, I saw him in an interview a few years ago talk about how people always call love stories unrealistic. And he's like, I don't know what they're talking about. People fall in love all the time. And I think that's true. Like, people do fall in love all the time. It's like we don't see it, it's like it kind of is almost alarming to me how much we don't notice all this sort of goodness and kindness and caretaking that's going on all around us all the time. We're just so focused on the problems that need to be fixed and the things we're worrying about and the serial killers of the world, that it's really for, all the times when like somebody's, husband brought them a cup of coffee, or, somebody's daughter just called to say hello and check in. Like, those things kind of get overlooked. So yeah, I like watching Charlie's transformation, but I think I was also kind of making an argument, just a culture-wide argument about, we don't have to be so jaded. There's actually love going on all around us all the time.
Absolutely. I have to ask, did you want to be a doctor in another life? Because you don't come up with, but you include, at least like with Hello Stranger, now this one, like these really interesting, health issues as part of a character's arc or whatever. So yeah, is it just something that has come about for you, or you like including, or tell me more about that?
Well, I love to do research and I love to learn about stuff. So yeah, Hello Stranger was my last year book, and it was about this woman who gets a condition called face blindness that a lot of people haven't heard of. Actually, a lot of readers were like, is this even real, or did this writer make this up? But I heard about it on a podcast years ago, and it kind of stuck in my head. I was like, that would be so interesting if you could see everything except for faces. So there's nothing wrong with your vision.
Right.
It's just the processing part for faces isn't quite working. I love taking deep dives into that stuff. I love learning about new things. I love reading about that kind of stuff. And then the other thing I'll say is that I think characters, I always want to make sure that my characters are struggling with things. They have to have things to overcome. And I think, in modern life, everybody I know has some kind of health thing that they're worrying about, struggling with, dealing with, overcoming. And so I just think they do show up in my books a lot, but I also think that those kinds of things are really common in the world.
Yeah.
In the current world that we're living in. So, I just include them because that's sort of part of the world that I live in, and it feels, real.
Yeah. Well, and I know Emma is dealing with anxiety, but you write it in such a like seamless way, not just like, oh, I'm going to tack this on, like, and make her have this, like it was a part of her, but not, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like, it seems like it would be hard to write those physical or mental health issues in with characters, but it just seems very easy in your books.
Well, and the heart thumping thing. So Emma has a heart thumping thing where like she'll just be sitting there and all of a sudden she'll realize that her heart is just like dunk, 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 out of her
Hmm.
chest for like no apparent reason. There's a scene where this wakes her up in the middle of the night and she thinks there's an earthquake
What's that?
going on in LA. And that's based on a real thing. That was me. A person I love very much was very sick for about a year and a half. And it was really terrifying and it was really stressful. And everybody is fine now. But I was totally fine while it was happening. And I was totally like, we're going to get this fixed. We're going to deal with this. We're going to get it solved. And then when it was over, after it was over, when everybody was fine, my heart started thumping out of my chest for months. And I was like, am I dying? Like, what's happening? Am I having a heart attack? Like, what's going on? And I went to the doctor because I was like, something's not right with my heart. Like, it is out of control. And the doctor was like, well, sometimes when you've been in a really stressful period of your life, your body waits to feel the effects of that stress until
Yeah.
after you've dealt with the stress. So she was like, might just be stress and anxiety, showing up now that it's safe to do that. So, that was, and it took me a while for that to kind of go away, but I was thinking about it a lot when I was writing the story. So I gave it to Emma.
I find too that the books that really, that those 5-star reads to me that stand out, not only do I love the main characters, the hero and the heroine, but I love like there's secondary characters that really stand out to me. And Emma's dad is one of those for me, like in this book. Like this man and just the way he lives his life, I'm going to take from this book and just take with me from here on out. Like, was he just this gem to write too, or how did his character sort of come about for you?
Yeah, he was a lot of fun to write. So Emma's dad was in a climbing accident while rock climbing and got a traumatic brain injury that left him with a lot of ongoing health struggles. And one of them is Meniere's disease. I had actually my high school boyfriend's dad had this problem. And so I got to see it really up close for a few years there back in the day. And it has always kind of stuck with me because it was very, very limiting, because Meniere's disease is an inner ear issue. You can just be, with certain forms of it, you can just be sitting there and all of a sudden it feels like the whole room
Yeah.
just flipped upside down. And this was the kind that this person I knew had.
Mm.
And so you can't drive in that situation, so he was really limited in terms of what he could sort of like his mobility and his independence. So he's got some other stuff too. And, he lost a lot of things, I don't know how much is spoilers, but he lost a
Mhm.
lot of very important things in his life. And I am always so astonished by and inspired by people who can go through really hard things and find ways to be okay on the other side. I'm not very good at that as a person. Like, I'm pretty not great at it, actually. And if bad things happen to me, like, I basically just want to
Fair.
like lie on the floor in the fetal position and be like, never mind, we're all doomed. Like, I am easily discouraged. I'm a total quitter. Like, it's not easy for me to find the upside of things. But because of that, I so admire people who do and who can. And my husband is one of those
Really?
people. He's really, really good at finding the upside. He'll be like, well, we got a flat tire, but we found that great taco truck or like whatever it is. And I'm like, oh, you're so positive. But I want to be more like that. I think being like that is so healthy and nourishing. And I'm always kind of studying it. I'm always kind of watching
Yeah.
those people like, how are
Yeah.
you doing that? So I write about it a lot because I think about it a lot because I would like to be better at it. And I think stories are a good way for us to
Mhm.
teach ourselves
Yeah.
how to be better at things. And so, yeah, he's one of those characters that has really, really seen a lot, like an astonishing amount of loss and heartbreak and suffering. And he has found a way through it and in the wake of it to make his life as good as it can possibly be, which I love.
I loved him. Absolutely. He was great. So it's obviously also talking about rom-com movies, which I mean, I'm obsessed with romance books, but I too love a good rom-com. What do you look for in like a rom-com that you love to watch?
That's a great question. I'm kind of picky about my rom-coms. I really am. And I think it's harder for a movie. Like, I've had a couple of books now that have been turned into movies, and I have been aware that you just don't really have a lot of time. Like, when you take a novel and you turn it into a screenplay, you're basically taking something that's 300 plus pages and you're shrinking it down to 90 pages. 90 pages is the sort of standard length of a screenplay because screenplays translate to each page is about a minute of screen time. So you can't have a 250-page screenplay because then you would have a movie that no one would ever sit still to watch. I mean, you'd have to have an intermission or something, right? Like, so they, by their nature, are shorter, less dense, more compact. You can't fit all the stuff in there. And so I think it's really like, I just think a really great rom-com movie, one that gives you all the things that you want from a rom-com, is just like a little miracle when that happens. And what I want, thank you for this question. I love this question. What I want from a rom-com is I want that rising feeling of anticipation of like just waiting for these two people to figure it out and get together. I want that. And the more intensely I can get it, the better. I want to laugh. So I want it to be actually funny, which is not always an easy get. And then I want to cry. Like a little bit. I want it to like rip my heart out and then pop it back in. You know, I want that moment when it feels like all is lost. And one, like just off the top of my head, one scene that pops to mind is in Bridget Jones's Diary. You know, she's been dating Hugh Grant. She feels like she's gotten everything she ever wanted. And then he leaves early and she goes home and finds him like with another naked woman, like, right. And there's a moment right after that when she goes home, she embarrassingly, in the moment that she finds out he's with another woman, is wearing a Playboy bunny costume. So vulnerable and naked as you be. And she's insecure about her body. And this woman that he's with is like, you know, very tall and lean and supermodel-y. And anyway, the next scene is her sitting in the bathtub. I think she's still got the bunny ears on, crying in the bathtub. And every time I see that moment, my eyes fill up with tears for her because I get it. I feel it, that rejection, that, you know, that all those questions that come up in love, like, are you lovable? Are you ever going to be good enough? Will you find somebody who gets you and who you can trust and who you can be with? All those questions are sort of packed in. And the happy part at the end, when you finally get to that happy ending, is so much happier because you had that moment where you cried, right? And so for me, I want a story to go like this. I don't want it to just go happy ending. I want it to go happy. Yeah. And that's I think that's such a crucial moment that gets overlooked a lot of the time. So yeah, absolutely. I want to laugh and I want to cry and I want to swoon. That's what I want.
That's why I'm going to take one quick quote from the book, because that's why this is my favorite quote from, I think it was Emma's sister, where she's like, why can't you just tell him you like him? And Emma's like, if relationships work that way, I'd be out of a job, which is so true because we want that like, you know, trajectory, you know?
Yeah. And also the internet has decided, or the rom-com reading internet has kind of decided that they don't like the miscommunication trope, you know? And like another PSA that I would love to do for the world is to say, okay, let's not take that out of the toolkit, right? I think what people really hate is the miscommunication trope done badly.
Correct. Yes.
Right? Yeah. Like insulting miscommunication, you know, where like any normal human being would not have been fooled by whatever this person got fooled. But a good miscommunication, like you kind of can't beat it for like a really delicious all is lost moment afterwards. And so I just want to say to the world, like, please don't take the don't cancel miscommunication, because also we all miscommunicate all the time.
All the time.
Right? You have no idea what other people are thinking about you. You have no idea what your crush thinks about you. And you literally cannot walk in and just be like, you know, throw our cards on the table. Do you like me or not?
Right.
You can't. You're reading. It's way too vulnerable, right? So, I mean, I think about that a lot, that like, has there ever been a time in my entire life of, you know, dating people and engaging in like love shenanigans when I literally like asked somebody to like lay it out for me verbally? Never. You know, you're just reading the tea leaves and trying to figure it out and you're hopeful. But that's also part of the fun. So I want that. I love miscommunication if it's done right.
Yes.
So I'm going to stand up for, this is another one of the many hills that I'm going to die on. I'm going to stand up for miscommunication.
We're going to see that in the next book, or maybe the next book after this one. You're going to like, I'm doing this one right for a book.
Oh man, I'll have to put a warning on the front that's like miscommunication ahead. Be warned.
Right, right. Well, you're about to go on a multi-city book tour, right? Are those just like wild or fun, exhausting, all of the above? Like,
yeah, I love going on book tour. I'm not really an extrovert. I'm kind of a hybrid. I love the moment of talking to other people, and then I have to go home and take like a 3-hour nap.
For sure.
So yeah, I'm going to go on a 3-week book tour. It's basically going to take up most of June. And it's basically, you get up in the morning and fly to a city, and then you do an event in that city, and you go back to the hotel, go to sleep, get up the next morning and fly to a different city. So it's very kind of frantic and intense, and it moves really fast. And I'm a person who mostly kind of stays in her pajamas, at home. So it is a lot of extroverting for me, but I also like, there's nothing more fun. I mean, like getting to see actual readers. Like if you're a writer, you don't have colleagues. I don't have a workplace. I'm just alone in the house with my imaginary friends. Like that's my life. And so to get out and see people and to get hugs from people and to talk to people and to hear about like how they found my books, like, what they were, what moment they were in. I hear over and over from people that they found my books in a hard moment in their lives, when they were sick or someone they loved was sick and they just needed some comfort. So just getting to meet everybody and hug everybody. And I also really, really love to be up on stage. I think I am better on stage than in real life, honestly. Like you do not want to run into me in the grocery store. You want to come to an event because, all the adrenaline just wakes me up and I just am saying all the funniest things I can possibly think of to say. And we laugh a lot. And on this coming book tour, if I can possibly figure out a way to do it, and it's not entirely guaranteed because every bookstore is a little different in terms of capabilities, but I'm really, really going to try to have line dancing
I was going to say, I want to go to the Georgetown, Texas one because you're doing line dancing.
At Georgetown, you'll never regret it. Yeah.
Oh my.
There's a line dancing scene in the book, and I myself have been taking line dancing for a year and a half. I'm terrible, but it's been very fun. And there's something about being together in a group. I thought about this a lot during the pandemic when we were all so isolated. There's something so nourishing about getting together with other people. And then if they're book people, that's even better. It's just nice, good-hearted people.
For sure.
It is fun. I'm hoping we'll all get to line dance.
Well, I can't wait to hear about it and see little clips on Instagram or something from the line dancing. That's fabulous. Can we talk a little bit about closed door romance? Because, people will write into me and they're like, I'm not looking for something steamy. Do you have a recommendation? And I'm like, read Katherine Center. Her books are fabulous. So, was that sort of a purposeful direction for you, or how did that sort of come to be for your books?
Yes. So I started out in way back in the literary world, right? And there is no sex, in that way in literary writing. I mean, there is sex, but it's sad sex. I'm not sure what it is. But, there are a lot of sort of more literary books or more women's fiction-y books where you don't even get a kiss. You can read waiting for two people to get together and then they lean in and then it's the next chapter and it's 10 years later and you're like, I was programmed. I wanted that kiss. So I started out writing women's fiction with strong romantic elements. That was sort of my technical category. And as I've gotten older and wiser and become more fun, I have moved in a much stronger kind of rom-com romancy direction. But by then I had already written a bunch of books, before that happened. And the books that I had written were all very PG-13. The other true thing about my life is that I am married to a middle school teacher. He teaches 7th graders, and they're all very curious to know what Mr. Center's wife is up to. And so, and I'm constantly going to book fairs, where I'm signing to Janie and she's 13, and
right.
So I wouldn't want to frighten anyone. And I mean, you could make the argument that it is probably better for these children to learn about the joys of human companionship from a good-hearted person like myself rather than the internet. But
right.
Felt like a chasm that I did not want to cross. And then the other final thing that kind of cemented it all for me was, The Bodyguard, which came out in 2022, was one of the first books I've written that got marketed as a rom-com. So it had an illustrated cover. You could tell just from looking at it that it was built on a love story. And so a bunch of new readers came in who were romance readers. And I was really surprised that summer after the book came out that people were docking me stars. Not everybody. Some people were delighted, that the books were 13 and they were like, this is awesome. I can read this with my grandma and it's not creepy. I mean, there were many people who were delighted. But I was surprised at the people who were docking me stars because they were like, okay, there was 0 spice in this book. It would have been 5 stars if we'd had a little spice, but it wasn't. So I'm taking one off. And I was so surprised, because I'd never had that happen before.
Right.
Sitting in the dining room, in this very room where I'm sitting now. And my daughter was home from college. And she's kind of milling around. And I'm scrolling through these reviews on Goodreads. And I'm like, guys, people are mad that there's no spice in these books. Should I start writing spice? And my 20-year-old daughter was like, I, for one, never need you to do that. And that's the other thing is that, like, not only is my husband a middle school teacher, but my kids are 18 and 22, I think. And so, they don't, yeah, they sweetly do read my books and I wouldn't want to scare them. So that's kind of where I've landed on all of that. But I also feel like the other thing for me is, and I'll just keep talking. I mean, I don't know how late we get to stay, but for me in a romance novel, like I'm okay with spice. I'm not against spice. I think spice is fine. It is a natural part of what happens when you fall in love with somebody. You do want to go to bed with that person. So I'm cool with spice. But I also like the real thing that pulls me to romance is the longing. That's what I want. I want the human connection and I want to get immersed in that totally addictive feeling of longing. And so I do want something physical to happen between these two people. I want them to physically come together. But a swoony kiss is enough for me to be emotionally satisfied with that story because, like, if I don't get a kiss, I'm actually kind of mad. I don't want them to just gaze at each other across the table. I want them to physically embrace each other. But that's really the crux of it for me. I want that longing and I want them to connect in that sort of very profound way at the end. And if you throw in
Yeah.
too much spice too early, for me, it's not satisfying.
Right.
I want to wait. I want to be made to wait. I'm definitely a slow burn person.
It's that anticipation, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah, that is exactly what I want. So
Well, and I appreciate that in this book, you sort of normalized for me the idea that you can go back and rewind, like those swoony kisses that just like give you all those feels. Cause I have done that. And I was like, oh, thank God.
that conversation that Emma and Charlie have together, where she's just like, this is a rewatchable kiss. And he's like, I don't know what that is. And she's like, it's the kisses that you rewind because they were so great. And he's like, I've never done that. And she's like, everybody does that. What are you talking about? That was the
Right.
real conversation I had with my kids. I was like, it was such a rewatchable kiss. And my kids were like, nobody rewatches kisses. And I was like, everybody rewatch.
Everybody.
So we had to agree to disagree on that. But
I love that.
yeah.
Well, you talked about how 2 of your books have already been made into movies. Is there any word on this one being picked up? Because, I mean, it's just begging to be made into a movie.
There is no word that I can discuss.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, I mean, I'm always, I always have my fingers crossed for stuff like that because it is very fun. Although I do also think that the movies are pretty different from the books because of that thing we were talking about before, because it's just a totally different format. So it's just going to be a different thing, but it's still fun to see them. It's fun to see them I love audiobooks in my books. I love movies I love to see all the stories and all their different permutations. It's very exciting.
Well, if it helps people or whoever's shopping around or probably already bought it, like I was thinking about it and I was like, somebody immediately came to mind for casting, which normally like never happens to me. I just don't think that way when I read books.
Yeah.
But especially that first scene where they meet and stuff, I'm like, I could see Amy Schumer as Emma. You know Amy Schumer? Because I'm like, she has this dramatic, she can go dramatic, but she's also very funny. And I could see her very real, like with her dad. So I'm like, that's my vote for it.
I love that idea. Absolutely. I think really ultimately the most important thing is that I always want in an actress somebody who can like have that sort of wry delivery, that sort of deadpan wry delivery. And also I want somebody who can be really vulnerable. I want somebody who can break your heart, who's like got the toughness and the tenderness. And I think that's a little bit of a tricky get.
It is. Absolutely. Well, if you have a few more minutes, I'm going to ask you a couple questions about Katherine the reader, but is there anything else that readers need to know about the rom-coms before they go out and buy it when it comes for June 11th?
No, just that I hope you get a chance to read it. I hope you love it. Like just, get in the bubble bath and lock the door. Don't let anybody bother you.
Well, you heard it from her, folks. Just go ahead and order the book, draw up a bath, and soak into the awesomeness of the Rom-Commers when it releases on June 11th, because trust me, you don't want to miss this book. It is on my list of must-read summer romance books of 2024 and is also part of my fun game this summer called A Passport to Romance, which will have you traveling all around Europe and the United States with the settings in the books on my passport list. You can learn more about this game, download the passport and the free Canva passport templates, and enter to win a copy of my A Year of Reading Romance card deck by playing when you join the She Reads Romance Books book club. A Passport to Romance will be available all summer long to members within the book club. Plus, I have another reason why you are going to want to join the club. Are you ready? Because this is big news, you guys. Big, 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 big. And that is that Katherine Center will be joining us in the She Reads Romance Books book club this July. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. The Rom-Commers is going to be our July 2024 book club selection. And so we will be talking all about Emma and Charlie in our July club meeting. And members will get to join me in the author Q&A call where we will be joined by Katherine to talk more about the Rom-Commers and ask her all of your questions about the book. I seriously felt like we could have chatted all day when we spoke for this podcast episode, and she is so excited to join the book club this July. So I really hope you join the club so you have the opportunity to chat with her, which is really just going to be such a fun night. I cannot wait. Also, though, as a member of the club, if I haven't enticed you already, you will have access to my extended interview with Katherine, which you can watch as a video and only available as a video in the club, where we honestly talked for, I think 15 or 20 more minutes about Katherine the reader, what she loves about reading romance, her favorite books and authors, and so much more. She also played my this or that game and was such a good sport about it. It was a really fun extended interview, and I can't wait for you to check it out. So I know you're all going to be clicking on that link in the show notes to order the Rom-Commers and join the book club right after this episode, and I cannot wait to see you inside. So thank you so much for tuning in today and for listening, and as always, happy reading because life is better with a love story. That's all for this episode of the She Reads Romance Books podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some new books to add to your TBR list. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really helps me reach more romance book lovers like you, and I appreciate your support. If you're a book boyfriend collector like me, then you'll want to join my email list so you never miss a podcast episode or a new book list. Just visit shereadsromancebooks.com/join and sign up today. As a thank you, I'll instantly send you my list of top 10 book boyfriends that will make you swoon. Trust me, you don't want to miss this list. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading.